They auctioned the fat girl like cattle. Now she's mine, and we want payback. Marlena Brooks had lived in the same small rural town her entire life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name before you could properly introduce yourself, and where childhood nicknames followed you well into adulthood. The town was surrounded by open fields, quiet dirt roads, and a sense of tradition that rarely changed. People there loved their annual events, especially the Fall Livestock Festival. It was their pride, their celebration, and their favorite excuse to gather.
But for Marlena, public gatherings had never felt like celebrations. Growing up, she had always been bigger than the other girls her age.
Not just taller, but heavier too. While other kids seemed to grow into their bodies naturally, Marlena felt like she was always out of place. Bah! In school hallways, whispers would trail behind her. Some were quiet, some were not. Burf. She learned early how to pretend she didn't hear them. She had a soft heart and a quick laugh, but over time she stopped laughing as loudly. Narration. She began choosing seats in the back of classrooms. She wore loose sweaters even in warm weather. Narration. She mastered the art of shrinking herself without physically changing her size. It was her way of surviving. By the time she turned 23, Marlena worked at the local grocery store bakery. She decorated cakes, arranged pastries, and handled custom orders. It was the one place she felt confident. Behind the counter, with flour on her hands and the smell of fresh bread in the air, she felt capable. Customers complimented her designs. Children smiled when they saw her colorful cupcakes. In that small space, she wasn't the big girl. She was talented. Still, outside those walls, the old feelings followed her. The Livestock Festival came every October. It brought in visitors from nearby towns.
There were food stalls, music, games, and a fundraising event called the Bachelor Bid. It was meant to be lighthearted. Single men volunteered to be auctioned off for fun dates.
Most people treated it like a joke, a silly tradition no one thought too deeply about. This year, Marlena had planned to avoid it. Large crowds made her nervous, but her coworker Jenna insisted she come. It'll be fun, Jenna had said. You can't hide forever. Marlena didn't want to admit how much that word hide stung. So she agreed. The evening of the festival arrived, cool and clear. String lights hung across the fairgrounds, glowing softly against the darkening sky. The scent of barbecue and popcorn filled the air. Laughter echoed from every direction. Families walked around holding paper plates piled high with food. Teenagers gathered near the music stage. Marlena wore her favorite blue dress. It wasn't flashy, but it made her feel comfortable. She had spent extra time brushing her long brown hair and even added a touch of lip gloss. She told herself she deserved to feel nice, even if no one noticed.
At first, the night went smoothly.
She and Jenna walked through the stalls, sampled homemade pies, and watched children chase each other near the petting zoo. For a few hours, Marlena almost forgot her usual worries. Then the announcement came over the loudspeaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Bachelor Bid. Cheers erupted from the crowd gathered near the main stage. A wooden platform had been set up, with hay bales arranged around it to match the festival theme. A local radio host stood at the center, holding a microphone and smiling widely.
Jenna grabbed Marlena's arm. Let's go watch. They found a spot near the side of the stage.
The first few men were auctioned off with playful teasing. The crowd laughed, but it felt harmless. Bids clanged quickly. It was all part of the show. Marlena relaxed slightly. Brrr. Maybe the night would stay light. Behind the stage, however, a small group of men who had been drinking more than they should have were whispering and laughing among themselves. Inspiration. They were familiar faces in town, men who had grown up there, who had never quite matured past their high school sense of humor. Brave.
One of them held a clipboard with the list of official participants. "What if we add one more?" he said, grinning.
The others laughed.
Who? He scanned the crowd and spotted Marlena standing near the stage, unaware.
Inspiration. A smirk spread across his face. Without thinking about consequences, without considering dignity, they scribbled something on the list and passed it to the radio host, pretending it was part of the planned lineup. On stage, the host glanced down at the updated sheet, confused for only a second before assuming it was intentional. "And now," he announced loudly, "we have a surprise addition tonight." The crowd leaned in. From behind the curtain, Marlene heard her own name mispronounced through the speakers. At first, she thought she had imagined it. But then came a nickname she had heard too many times in her life, a nickname about her size. The crowd reacted with scattered laughter. Some people looked confused.
Others pulled out their phones, thinking it was part of the joke. Marlena's stomach dropped.
Brr.
"Jenna turned pale. This isn't funny," she whispered.
The host, trying to keep the energy up, continued reading from the list, not fully understanding the cruelty behind it. "Come on up!" Marlena couldn't move. It felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The light seemed brighter. Inspiration. The noise grew louder. Her ears rang. Desperatum. She realized what had happened. Someone had put her name into the auction as a joke. Inspiration. They weren't celebrating her. They were presenting her as entertainment. Inspiration. Her face burned, but her hands felt ice cold. A few mock bids were shouted from the back.
$5. 10.
Laughter followed each number. It wasn't the playful kind from earlier.
It carried a different tone. A tone she recognized too well. Barasp. Humiliation. Marlena's chest tightened. Inspiration. She could feel tears pressing against her eyes, but she refused to let them fall.
"Not here!"
Free.
Not in front of everyone. For a moment, she considered running.
Inspiration. Disappearing into the crowd.
Going home and pretending she had never come.
Then something unexpected happened. A deep voice from near the front of the stage cut through the noise. Inspiration. $1,000. The laughter stopped almost instantly. People turned to see who had spoken. Inspiration. Caleb Turner stood with his hands at his sides. He had moved to town only 6 months earlier to manage his uncle's farm. He wasn't known for jokes or drama. He kept mostly to himself. Quiet. Observant. Purred. And completely serious. The radio host blinked. "Did you say 1,000? Caleb nodded once. The sudden shift in energy was noticeable. What had started as a cruel joke no longer felt light. The high bid silenced the mockery. No one else spoke. The host cleared his throat and raised the gavel. Inspiration. 1,000 going once, going twice. The men behind the stage looked uneasy now. Their laughter faded. Sold. The gavel came down. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Bursts. Some people clapped hesitantly, unsure how to react. Others looked uncomfortable. Narration. Marlena stood frozen. She hadn't stepped onto the stage. Narration. She hadn't agreed to any of this. But somehow the moment had shifted from open cruelty to something more complicated. Caleb didn't smile. He didn't wave. Narration. He simply walked toward the side of the stage where Marlena stood. Up close, his expression was calm but firm. Narration. You don't have to go up there, he said quietly so only she could hear. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Narration.
His words surprised her. He wasn't treating it like he had won a prize.
He was giving her a choice. For the first time since her name had been called, Marlena felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. Barrage. Around them, the crowd waited to see what would happen next. Phones were still raised, capturing every second. Narration. But something had changed. The joke no longer felt funny. And for the first time that night, Marlena realized she wasn't standing completely alone. The crowd did not know what to do after the gavel came down. A few people clapped softly, but most just stood there, shifting their weight, avoiding eye contact. The laughter from earlier had disappeared. The music from the nearby food stalls sounded distant now, as if the festival had moved far away. Marlena felt every pair of eyes on her.
Caleb stood beside her, not touching her, not rushing her. He kept his voice low and calm.
Narration. You don't owe them a show, he said gently. If you want to leave, I'll walk you to your car. That simple sentence meant more to her than he could know. He wasn't acting proud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Great. He was offering protection without making her feel weak.
Jenna quickly stepped closer.
Let's go, she whispered to Marlena.
We don't need to stay. Marlena nodded.
Her legs felt shaky, but she forced them to move. As she and Jenna stepped away from the stage, Caleb followed a few steps behind, making sure no one tried to stop them. Some people in the crowd looked ashamed. Others looked curious. A few of the men who had started the joke tried to laugh it off, pretending it had all been harmless fun. But their laughter sounded thin now. When Marlena reached the edge of the fairgrounds, she finally let out the breath she had been holding. The cool night air hit her face, and she realized her hands were trembling.
I'm so sorry, Jenna said. I should have never asked you to come.
It's not your fault, Marlena replied softly, but her voice felt distant, even to herself.
Caleb stopped a respectful distance away. Are you okay to drive? He asked. She nodded automatically even though she wasn't sure. He seemed to sense that.
Why don't I follow you home? He offered. Just to make sure you get there safely.
There was no pressure in his tone. Just quiet concern. She had seen him around town before. At the hardware store. At the grocery store, when he came to buy flour and sugar. He had always been polite but reserved. Tonight, he had done something no one else had done. He had stepped in.
Okay,
she said finally. The drive home felt longer than usual. Marlena kept replaying the moment in her mind. The microphone. The nickname.
The laughter! The bids shouted like she was part of the livestock being sold that weekend.
Brr. Her chest tightened again. When she reached her small house on Maple Street, she parked and turned off the engine. Brr. For a moment, she just sat there in the quiet. Caleb's truck pulled up behind her. He stepped out but didn't approach until she opened her door. "You're home," he said gently, as if confirming it for both of them. Brr. Yes. They stood in the soft glow of the porch light. Crickets chirped in the distance. The festival noise was gone now, replaced by normal night sounds. "I'm sorry that happened," Caleb said. Brr.
It shouldn't have.
Marlena swallowed.
It's not new.
She admitted. Bration.
Just more public. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer quick advice.
He simply listened.
They've always joked, she continued, staring at the ground.
Bration.
I just thought we were past that stage. We're not kids anymore. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly.
Some people never grow up. She gave a small, tired smile. Thank you, Britt, for what you did. He shrugged lightly. It didn't feel right. That's all. Bration. There was something steady about him. Not dramatic. Bration. Not loud. Just solid. Bration.
If you need anything tomorrow, he added, call me. She nodded again, unsure what else to say. After a quiet goodnight, she went inside.
Bration. The moment the door closed behind her, the tears she had been holding back finally fell. She leaned against the door and slid down to the floor, covering her face.
It wasn't just about the auction. It was years of small comments.
Bration. Years of being the joke. Years of pretending she didn't care. Bration. But mixed in with the hurt was confusion. Why had Caleb bid so high? The next morning, Marlena woke up hoping the entire night had been a bad dream. But her phone buzzing on the bedside table quickly reminded her it was real. Messages filled her screen. Some were from friends asking if she was okay. Bray. Others were from people pretending nothing serious had happened. A few even tried to laugh about it, calling it wild or unexpected. Bray. Then she saw something else. A short video clip had already been posted online. Bration. Someone had recorded the auction moment. The nickname, Barish. The laughter, and Caleb's voice cutting through with his high bid. Bray. The comments below were divided. Some called it funny.
Others called it cruel. Marlena quickly put her phone down.
Bray. She couldn't read anymore. At the grocery store bakery later that morning, the atmosphere felt different. Brr.
A few co-workers avoided her eyes. Others offered awkward smiles.
Bration. Jenna came straight to her. Have you seen the video? Before Jenna could say more, the store manager approached. He looked uncomfortable. Brr. Listen, he began carefully. If you want to take a few days off, we understand. The offer surprised her. Part of her wanted to hide at home. Bray. But another part of her was tired of hiding.
I'm okay.
She said quietly. Bray.
I'd rather work.
Bray.
Behind the counter decorating a birthday cake, she found a small sense of peace. The steady motion of spreading frosting helped calm her racing thoughts.
Breath. Around noon, the bell above the bakery door chimed. She didn't look up at first.
I'll take 2 of those cinnamon rolls, a familiar voice said. Her hand paused.
Narration. He wasn't smiling widely. He looked normal. Casual.
Narration. Like this was just another morning.
Of course, she said, trying to sound steady.
As she placed the pastries into a box, he leaned slightly closer so others couldn't hear. I spoke to the festival committee this morning. Her heart skipped.
Narration.
You did? Yes! I told them what happened wasn't acceptable.
What did they say? They claimed it was a misunderstanding, that your name was added without their approval. His expression made it clear he didn't fully believe that excuse. And I told them that misunderstandings don't happen by accident when someone's dignity is involved. Her throat tightened again, but this time not from humiliation. No one's ever said that for me before, she admitted softly. Bert.
He met her eyes. You deserved someone to.
Over the next few days, Caleb continued to check in. Never too much, never overwhelming. A simple message asking how work was going. A quick stop by the bakery. A casual walk through town where they talked about ordinary things. Recipes, farming, weather, childhood memories, narration. He never brought up her weight. Never mentioned the nickname. Bert. He treated her like she was simply Marlena. And slowly, something inside her began to shift. Meanwhile, the men who had started the joke noticed the change in tone around town. The laughter had faded. Narration. Whispers had taken its place. Some community members were not amused anymore.
Parents began questioning what kind of example the festival was setting.
A few business owners worried about the negative attention from the online video.
Narration. The organizers released a short public statement saying they regretted any hurt feelings.
It sounded rehearsed and distant. Marlena read it once and felt a spark of frustration.
Hurt feelings. That was too small a phrase for what had happened.
But she didn't know what to do with that frustration yet.
One evening, about a week after the festival, Caleb invited her for coffee at a quiet cafe outside town.
Narration. She almost declined out of habit. Old instincts told her to avoid attention.
But she said yes. They sat by a window overlooking open fields.
Narration. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange light. You know, Caleb said thoughtfully, you don't have to pretend it didn't affect you.
Brave.
I don't want to be dramatic. It's not dramatic to expect respect. The word respect lingered between them. I've spent most of my life trying to be invisible, she admitted.
It's easier that way. And has it worked? He asked gently. She thought about that.
No, it hadn't. Ooh!
The auction had proved that even when she tried to stay small, people still noticed. They just chose to notice the wrong things. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider something different. What if she stopped shrinking? What if she stopped accepting jokes as normal?
As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marlena realized something important.
The worst night of her life had also revealed something unexpected. She wasn't alone.
And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to keep living as the quiet girl in the back anymore. The days after the festival were strange for Marlena.
The initial shock of the auction had faded, but the video of her humiliation still circulated online. Social media posts popped up from strangers commenting on the event, some sympathetic, others cruel. She tried not to read them, but her phone buzzed constantly. Narration. Each notification made her heart race. At the bakery, her coworkers were supportive, but some customers whispered behind her back. Brr. She caught snippets of conversation as she worked. "Did you see what happened at the festival?" one person asked. Brr. Another replied, "I can't believe someone actually bid on her like that." Some comments were sympathetic, others patronizing. Marlena felt her old anxieties creeping back, but she refused to let them take over. Narration. Caleb, however, remained a constant support. Every day he checked in with a simple text, "How's your day?" or "Need company at the bakery today?" Sometimes he would show up with coffee or lunch, sitting quietly while Marlena worked, chatting only when she wanted to. Bread.
His presence was calming. It was steady, reliable, and free of judgment.
Bursh. Slowly, Marlena began to trust that she didn't have to face her feelings alone. One afternoon, as the town buzzed with the usual weekend energy, a regional journalist arrived. "Bye!" He introduced himself politely and explained that he was writing an article about unusual events in small towns with a focus on public humiliation and community responsibility. Marlena felt her chest tighten. Narration. She wanted to hide, to pretend the festival had never happened. But Caleb put a hand gently on her shoulder. Narration. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said. I think I should," Marlena whispered. Narration. She hadn't realized how much she wanted her story to be heard until this moment. Not just for me, but for others. People who have been laughed at, judged, or ignored. The journalist nodded and promised discretion. Breath. Over the next hour, Marlena recounted her experience. The whispers from childhood, the auction, the shock, and the public attention. Brr. She spoke about the pain of being reduced to a joke and the relief she felt when someone finally stood up for her. Caleb didn't speak, he simply listened. Brr. His quiet support allowed her to speak honestly. The article was published a few days later. Brr. It highlighted the cruelty of the auction, Marlena's courage in speaking up, and Caleb's unexpected role in standing against humiliation. Responses were immediate. Narration. Outside of town, people reached out to commend her bravery. Local media covered the story too. Narration.
Slowly, the narrative began to shift. She wasn't just the girl who got auctioned. She was Marlena Brooks, a young woman refusing to be silenced, reclaiming her dignity.
Even within the town, attitudes started to change. Parents who had initially laughed with the crowd felt uncomfortable when they realized their children had witnessed the event. Teachers at the local school talked to their students about kindness and respect. The festival organizers released another statement, this time taking accountability for the incident, though it was carefully worded to avoid admitting any real wrongdoing. Despite the positive response, Marlena felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was relieved, part of her was still angry, and part of her was determined. She realized she wanted more than apologies. She wanted change. She wanted people to understand that public humiliation, even when disguised as fun, could have lasting effects. With Caleb's encouragement, she approached the town council.
It was a small room with wooden chairs and a long table where council members sat.
Berate. The room was warmer than she expected, filled with quiet murmurs as townspeople settled in. Marlena's hands shook slightly, but she took a deep breath and began speaking. I'm here because something happened at the festival that shouldn't have, she started. It may have seemed funny to some, but it was humiliating.
Not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt judged or made to feel small. We need to do better.
She explained the auction in detail, focusing on the emotional impact rather than blame. She spoke about the whispers she had heard her entire life and how public events like this could reinforce shame rather than community spirit.
Her voice grew steadier with each sentence. Caleb sat near the back, giving her the smallest nod whenever she looked unsure. After she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then one council member spoke.
We didn't realize how serious this was, he said slowly.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention, another added. We'll be reviewing the festival policies. We want events to be fun, but never at anyone's expense. Marlena felt a small surge of hope. The power to change something for the better, something that mattered to more than just her, felt invigorating.
Outside the town hall, reporters and townspeople approached her. Caleb stayed beside her, quiet but firm.
People asked questions, expressed sympathy, and some even apologized for laughing or not stepping in. Marlena realized that being visible, standing up, had an effect she hadn't imagined. The humiliation of one night had sparked something bigger than she had expected. Over the next few weeks, the organizers of the festival were pressured to remove the auction permanently. Local businesses began to support the idea of a more positive, inclusive event. Some of the men who had laughed at her faced consequences, not legal but social. Customers stopped frequenting their businesses, quietly demonstrating disapproval. The shift was subtle but real. Marlena also realized she was changing internally. She no longer allowed herself to shrink. She still had quiet moments of doubt, but the support she received, especially from Caleb, reminded her that she was worthy of respect. She began wearing clothes that made her feel confident rather than trying to hide her body. She walked taller, spoke louder, and laughed more freely. One evening, Caleb invited her to the farm where he worked. The field stretched for miles, the sun setting in a golden glow. I wanted you to see something, he said. He led her to a small building he had renovated. Inside, it was warm, clean, and organized, a perfect space for baking. I thought,
Maybe we could start something here, he said.
You could have your own bakery. You're talented, and you deserve the chance to do this on your terms.
Brave. The thought of owning her own space, of finally having a place where her abilities mattered more than her appearance, was overwhelming. Maditz. You really think I could? She asked softly. I know you can, Caleb replied. And I'll help however I can. Tears pricked her eyes, but this time they were tears of hope. The humiliation of the auction still lingered, but for the first time, Marlena saw a path forward. She wasn't defined by a nickname or a single night of cruelty. She was defined by her talent, her courage, and the choices she made now. As weeks turned into months, Marlena worked tirelessly to build her bakery. She balanced orders, learned new techniques, and developed her own signature recipes.
Caleb helped with the business side, teaching her about budgeting, inventory, and logistics. The old fears of being judged were still there, but each day they grew smaller.
The town began to notice the change. People who had once whispered began complimenting her courage and her creations.
Local newspapers ran small features on her bakery's progress. Even some of the people who had laughed at the auction approached her to apologize.
Marlena didn't hold grudges. She realized that forgiveness and moving forward would serve her better than anger. One afternoon, while decorating a wedding cake, Marlena received an email from a regional magazine. They wanted to write a story about her journey. From the auction to the bakery. They called it a story of resilience, courage, and standing up for oneself. She thought back to the night of the auction, the fear, the shame,
and the hopelessness. She realized that she had come a long way. She wasn't the same person who had stood frozen on the stage.
She was stronger, wiser, and more confident. Caleb entered the bakery that evening with a smile.
Another article? He asked. Yes, Marlena replied, her own smile breaking through.
But this time, it's not about humiliation. It's about taking control of my life. He nodded, pride in his eyes. You've earned every word. That night, Marlena looked around her bakery. The warm light, the smell of fresh bread, and the display of her creations reflected more than just her talent. They reflected her courage, her ability to rise above cruelty, to stand tall, and to create something meaningful in the face of adversity. And in that moment, she understood something crucial. The auction, the laughter, the pain. It hadn't defined her. It had only revealed what she was capable of.
Marlena was ready for the next chapter. One built on her own terms, surrounded by people who respected and supported her.
The past was a lesson, the present a challenge, and the future wide open and filled with possibility. Months passed since the auction, and Marlena's life began to feel like it had finally found a rhythm. Her bakery was no longer just a dream, it was her reality. Each morning she arrived early, opening the doors before the town woke up, preparing fresh bread, muffins, and pastries.
She had started small, focusing on quality over quantity, and word quickly spread. People came from nearby towns to see what the buzz was about.
Caleb was there every step of the way. He wasn't just helping with the heavy lifting. He was a steady presence, encouraging Marlena without ever pushing her. Sometimes they worked side by side in the kitchen, laughing when a cake didn't turn out perfectly or when flour dusted the floor like fresh snow. Other times he let her work alone, understanding that she needed her own space to build confidence and control. The town, too, had begun to shift.
The auction incident had sparked discussions about respect, kindness, and accountability. Parents spoke to their children about the importance of empathy. Teachers used Marlena's story as an example of standing up for oneself. Even the festival organizers had officially apologized and removed the auction permanently.
While they still faced quiet criticism from some residents, the overall tone in the town was one of learning and growth. Marlena found herself at the center of a subtle but powerful change. People who had once whispered about her weight or appearance now spoke to her with respect. Some approached her quietly in the bakery, offering apologies or sharing their own stories of being judged.
Others simply smiled, recognizing the courage it took to step forward. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense.
She hadn't humiliated anyone. She hadn't shouted or retaliated.
She had simply refused to be small. One afternoon, a woman entered the bakery with a shy smile.
She introduced herself as Hannah and told Marlena how much her story had inspired her. Hannah had faced similar ridicule in her own school years and had learned to hide herself, just like Marlena had. But reading about Marlena's courage had given her hope. "You make me believe I can be myself too," she said, tears welling up. Marlena felt a lump in her throat. She realized her pain had not been wasted. It had become a source of strength for others.
The media attention continued to grow!
Local newspapers, television segments, and even regional magazines featured her story. She spoke about resilience, self-respect, and the importance of standing up to humiliation. Marlena never focused on the cruelty she endured. Instead, she highlighted her journey from fear to empowerment. Each interview reminded her that her voice mattered and that she could help others find theirs.
Meanwhile, her relationship with Caleb deepened naturally. They spent long evenings walking through the fields behind the bakery, talking about everything from dreams to fears.
Neither of them rushed anything. There was no pressure, only steady companionship and shared laughter.
Marlena felt safe around him, not because he shielded her from the world, but because he reminded her she was capable of facing it on her own. One evening, as they walked through the golden fields, Marlena stopped and looked at Caleb.
I can't believe how far things have come, she said quietly. It feels like a completely different life.
It's the same world, he said, but you found a way to live in it on your terms. That's what makes all the difference.
Her bakery's success grew steadily. She began hosting baking classes for local teens, teaching them skills and encouraging self-confidence. Many students had faced bullying or self-doubt, and Marlena's story inspired them to embrace their talents. The classes weren't just about pastries. They were about believing in themselves, setting goals, and standing tall in the face of judgment.
As her reputation grew, so did her opportunities. She was invited to speak at community events, schools, and even neighboring towns. She shared her experience with grace, never focusing on the cruelty, but rather on the lessons she had learned and the positive change that had followed. Each speech ended with applause, smiles, and conversations that extended well beyond the event.
Marlena realized she had become a quiet leader in the town, someone people looked to for inspiration and courage. One evening, she received a letter in the mail.
It was from the regional council thanking her for her advocacy and courage. They wanted her input on creating more inclusive and respectful community events.
For the first time, Marlena understood the real impact of her actions. The auction that had once humiliated her had indirectly led to tangible change.
People were listening, and her voice mattered. Through all of this, she never forgot the night of the auction or the feeling of being reduced to a joke.
But instead of bitterness, she carried determination. She refused to let that night define her. She refused to let it define anyone else. She had turned humiliation into strength and laughter into respect. And in doing so, she discovered something powerful. The real payback wasn't revenge. It was success, dignity, and empowerment. The old auction barn, once the site of her humiliation, became a symbol of her triumph. With Caleb's encouragement, she proposed converting it into a larger bakery and community space. The idea was met with overwhelming support. Renovations began, and the barn was transformed into a bright, welcoming space filled with ovens, counters, and seating for customers. It became a place not just for baking, but for learning, sharing, and celebrating accomplishments. The grand opening of the renovated barn was a town-wide celebration. Families lined up to taste pastries and breads, while others signed up for upcoming baking classes. For Marlena, standing in that space felt surreal. She had walked into the barn years earlier with fear and humiliation.
Now, she walked in as the owner, the creator, the one in control of her story. Caleb was there beside her, smiling as they cut the ribbon together.
The crowd cheered not because of a joke or spectacle, but because of achievement and courage. Marlena looked around at the faces of the townspeople, old and new friends, students and supporters. She realized that the laughter that once caused her pain had been replaced with applause and respect. Later that evening, Caleb took her hand as they walked through the barn.
You did this, he said softly. You created something amazing. Marlena smiled, squeezing his hand.
We did this, she said. You've been here with me the whole way. The festival no longer included the auction, and events were redesigned to promote inclusion, kindness, and respect. Marlena's story remained a reminder of what could happen when someone chose to stand up against cruelty.
She didn't want to punish anyone. She wanted to inspire everyone. And she had succeeded.
In her bakery, Marlena often thought about the journey that had brought her here. The humiliation of the auction, the whispers from childhood, the struggle with self-confidence, all of it had shaped her. But the moments that truly mattered were the ones where she chose courage over fear, action over silence. Caleb remained her partner in life and business, not as a savior, but as an equal. Together, they planned new recipes, classes, and events to bring the community together. Their bond wasn't built on tragedy, but on trust, respect, and shared vision. Breath. One quiet evening after a long day of baking, Marlena sat by the window with a cup of tea, reflecting on the journey. The sun set over the fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, and the community that had learned alongside her. She smiled, realizing that the auction that had once felt like the worst night of her life had also been the beginning of something new. Narration. Something powerful. Something that no one could take away. Her bakery, her classes, her speeches, her friendship with Caleb, all of it was proof that true strength didn't come from avoiding pain. It came from facing it, learning from it, and using it to create a better future.
As night fell, the lights in the bakery glowed warmly, inviting anyone who needed hope, inspiration, or simply a fresh loaf of bread.
Inspiration. Marlena knew that what she had built was bigger than herself. It was a symbol of resilience, courage, and the quiet, unshakable power of choosing dignity over humiliation. Inspiration. And in that moment, Marlena finally understood the truth. The real payback wasn't about revenge. It was about taking control, standing tall, and building a life worth celebrating. The girl who had once been auctioned like cattle was now the woman who owned the ground she walked on, the life she had fought for, and the story she proudly shared with the world.